So today, I'm going to be making the alphabet of NBA players. What this means is I'm going to be determining the best player in the league from each letter in the alphabet. So we'll determine the best player with the last name starting with A, then the best player with the last name starting with B, C, D, and so on and so forth. This is going to be a pretty fun and interesting video to make. I think it's a creative idea, and if this video gets a certain amount of likes, I'll do an all-time version. So let me know if you guys enjoyed watching this video, because it's a bit of a different thing I'm doing on this channel. Now, typically in these videos, you're going to see me analyzing a lot of players and teams and going really in depth. And there's going to be a little bit of that in this video, but not that much because some of them are no-brainers. So with that being said, let's get started with this interesting video. So starting with A, the best player here is easily Giannis Antetokounmpo, and he will be for the years to come. Now this was a no-brainer, but we've got some honorable mentions going to Bam Adebayo and DeAndre Ayton. So now getting the letter B going, and this is a really interesting one because it's between three guys, and we have Jimmy Butler, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker. And if I'm being honest, I'm really not a big fan of Jimmy Butler's scoring game and his scoring package. And he's not very efficient, and last year he had one of the worst effective field goal percentages in the NBA, whereas Beal and Booker are both very good and very efficient scorers and winning players as well. But ultimately, I have to give it to Jimmy because there's a lot of reasons. And first is he has the clutch factor. He comes up big in the clutchest moments of the games and the season like very few others in the league. And with all this being said about Beal and Booker being very good scorers, and I like their games a lot, Jimmy's still the better playmaker, much better defender, the better rebounder, and the better leader. And with all this being said, none of this means anything because really this letter should go to Bull. Sorry, Jimmy. So now we got C, and this one goes to Steph Curry, another easy one, and the honorable mentions for this one go to John Collins and Clint Capella, who are both going to make a pretty good impact with the Hawks this year. So now we've got D, which is the most interesting conversation of the video, the hardest decision of the video, and the most controversial decision of the video, and it's between three top 10 players in Kevin Durant, Luka Doncic, and Anthony Davis. And believe it or not, I'm actually going to go with Luka Doncic. You guys know if you've watched the channel that I'm very high on Luka Doncic, and this is definitely a hot take, but I have my reasons, so let's break it down. First of all, I think he's a little bit better than Anthony Davis, and I know AD contributed to a championship and is the much better defender, but I think Luka just has a little bit of a better impact since he's the better playmaker and averages a lot of assists and makes his teammates better. And he has the better overall scoring game and is a very dynamic scorer all around the floor. So no disrespect to AD, but I just think Luka is a little bit better. And then in terms of Kevin Durant, this is one that could change by the end of this year, but I don't think KD is going to come back 100% from his Achilles injury. I think he's going to be probably as good a scorer as Luka, but then again, playmaking for me puts Luka a little bit over the top. So this is definitely a controversial decision, but I have to go with Luka Doncic for the letter D, with honorable mentions going to KD and Anthony Davis. So now for the letter E, we've got Joel Embiid. And I'm not even joking, the second best player here is James Ennis III. It looks like so far in this video we have an easy one, then a hard one, then an easy one, then a hard one, then an easy one. So maybe that'll keep going, I don't know, but Joel Embiid is easily the best here. So for F, it's between De'Aaron Fox and Evan Fournier. And it's not really close. Evan Fournier is the better shooter, but De'Aaron's definitely the better overall scorer, defender, and playmaker, and he's much more athletic and one of the fastest players in the league. So this is going to De'Aaron Fox for the letter F. So now we've got G, which is another really interesting one, and it's between Rudy Gobert and Paul George. And I think I have another unpopular opinion here because I'm actually going to go with Rudy Gobert. A lot of people don't really appreciate this guy's defense fully. And yes, he's won 2 DPOYs, but people are falling off a little bit on Rudy Gobert. But you have to remember that if you watch this guy play, he's not only a great rim protector and inside defender, but he can defend the pick and roll better than anyone. And while Paul George is still a very good wing defender, he can't get it done in the playoffs. So because of Rudy Gobert's just overall defensive and rebounding impact, I'm going to go with him. And another honorable mention here goes to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who by the end of the year actually could take this one. For H, we've got James Harden. Honorable mentions for this one go to Jrue Holiday and Montrezl Harrell, but another easy decision here. James Harden is a top 10 player, and he easily takes this one. So now we've got I, and this one's between Kyrie Irving and Brandon Ingram, and it's closer than you might think, but you have to go with Kyrie Irving ultimately because he's proven so far that he's a little bit of the better overall scorer and one of the best ISO players ever, and Brandon Ingram's only had one good season with slightly less good production than Kyrie, so we got to give it to Kyrie for now. For J, it's LeBron James. But an honorable mention goes to Nikola Jokic, who I still think is a top 10 player in the league, and another one goes to Jaren Jackson Jr., who's pretty good and probably top 50 in the league, but I had to give him an honorable mention at least because he's JJJ. So for K, this one's a pretty weak letter, and it's between Kyle Kuzma and Luke Kennard, and for now we have to give it to Kyle Kuzma. But by the end of this year, if Luke Kennard has a fully healthy season, he could overtake this one if he proves that he's really a true sharpshooter. Now we've got L, which is a really good one too, and it's going to be between Kawhi Leonard and Damian Lillard. And while Kawhi's getting a lot of hate because he choked in the playoffs in one game this year, I definitely still think this one goes to him because of his overall scoring game is probably equal to Dame's, but his defense easily gets it, and I still think he's definitely a top 5 player in the league. So Kawhi gets this one, honorable mention to Dame, and also some honorable mentions go to Kyle Lowry and Zach LaVine, who are two really good players as well. So now we've got M, and this is another really good one, and we have 5 players in contention for this one. I told myself I wanted to narrow it down, and for this one I narrowed it down to 3, so it's between Donovan Mitchell, Jamal Murray, and Chris Middleton. And ultimately, I'm going to go with Donovan Mitchell just because he's been the most dynamic scorer and the most consistent scorer out of those 3. And I could see Jamal Murray maybe overtaking this one next year if he has another dominant playoff run like he did this year, but for now it's got to go to Mitchell. And as I mentioned, I had 5 in contention for this one, so it goes to Donovan Mitchell, but honorable mentions go to, as I mentioned, Jamal Murray, Chris Middleton, CJ McCollum as well, and Ja Morant. And Ja Morant's a guy that could maybe take this one a couple years down the line. For N now, it's between Yusuf Nurkic and Kendrick Nunn, and ultimately I've got to go with Nurkic because of his at times dominant inside game, and he's the much better defender. Now for O, it's between Victor Oladipo and Kelly Oubre, and while Kelly Oubre had somewhat of a breakout season last year and is a very good scorer, I still have to go with Victor Oladipo because of his overall two-way game, and he's made the all-defensive team before. And I'm unfortunately one of those guys that thinks Victor Oladipo is past his prime and that injuries have taken him past his best days, but overall, even if he plays as a role player over the next few years, I think he's still a little bit better than Oubre. We'll see what happens this year though. Now for the letter P, this one's between Kristaps Porzingis and Chris Paul. And by the end of the year, I think Kristaps might be taking this one because of his scoring ability, his ability to stretch the floor, and just be a really good overall player on both ends of the floor. But this one has to go to Chris Paul for now, and it's because of his playmaking ability, and he's still playmaking at a very high level. He's a great leader and a little bit of a better on-ball defender. So for now, it's Chris Paul, but by the end of the year, it's probably going to be Porzingis. For the letter Q, there's no one, and for the letter R, it goes to D'Angelo Russell. This was a pretty easy decision, but an honorable mention goes to Derrick Rose. For the letter S, this is a very interesting and hard one to decide on, and it's between 3 guys, Pascal Siakam, Domantas Sabonis, and Ben Simmons. And I narrowed it down to Siakam and Ben Simmons. Domantas is still a really good overall player, but I wouldn't say at the same level as Siakam and Ben Simmons. And ultimately, I have to give it to Siakam just because of his overall scoring ability and how good he is in the post when he's at his best. I know he choked in the playoffs last year, but I still think he's a little bit better overall, and you'll see more about this comparison when I get to the 2016 redraft video, so definitely stay tuned for that. T is going to be a tough one too, as it's between Klay Thompson, Karl Anthony Towns, and Jason Tatum, who all 3 of those in my opinion are top 20 players in the NBA right now. And ultimately, I'm going to have to give it to Jason Tatum. I'm very high on him, and I think by the end of the year, he could be a top 10 player in the league. And I'll go ahead and spoil it. I already actually have him at 12 on my list. And I think he's a very good overall scorer who can shoot the ball at a very high level and create his own shot and average around 30 points per game when he's at his best. He's also a really good rebounder who rebounds at rates like big men sometimes. And he's a really good defender too, a really good wing defender. Probably not as good as Klay Thompson, but his overall scoring ability makes him the best player at this letter in my opinion. The best player at U is Jarrod Uthoff. Dog, I don't even know if I pronounced that right. I don't know who this guy is. Moving on. For V, it's between Fred VanVleet, Nikola Vucevic, and Jonas Valanciunas. And while I want to give it to Freddie because he's my boy from the Raptors, I'm going to go with Nikola Vucevic for this one. He's the guy that I think is a top 50 player in the NBA and is the most overall efficient and productive scorer out of these three guys here. When he's at his best, he can be a good three-point shooter, especially in the pick and pop, as that's the Magic's go-to play, and he's also very good down low, scoring and rebounding and scoring in the post. For the letter W, we've got 4 players in contention here, and those are Zion Williamson, Kemba Walker, John Wall, and Russell Westbrook. And ultimately, I'm going to have to go with Russell Westbrook, as he's a guy that, despite not performing well in the playoffs as well, he's still a very good driver to the basket, one of the best in the league at that, especially at the guard position, and he's a very good playmaker and rebounder. He's not a very good three-point shooter, and I could see maybe Zion taking over this one by the end of the year, but overall, I definitely think he's the best overall player here still. For X, there's no one, and then for Y, there's only 2 players in Trae Young and Thaddeus Young, so obviously it goes to Thaddeus Young. And finishing it off with Z, it's between Cody Zeller and Ivica Zubac, and it's a really close comparison here with 2 pretty good role players and pretty good big men, and I have to go with Zeller just because his production last year was a little bit higher. So there, my friends, is the alphabet of NBA players going into the 2020-2021 NBA season. I definitely tried something different today with this creative type of video idea, so if you enjoyed, make sure to let me know and leave a like on the video, and if this, like I mentioned at the start, if this video gets a certain amount of likes, I'll make an all-time version of this. So if you want to see the all-time version, definitely make sure you leave a like. Still, about 88% of you guys watching the channel aren't subscribed, so definitely make sure you do that. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next video.